Whereas I'm no coronavirus expert, I have been a hypochondriac for years. I'm also a radio talk show host, author, and columnist, which I guess in some way qualifies me to talk about this. My name is Howard Feldman, and here are my thoughts. During my lifetime, there have been some pivotal moments. The falling of the Berlin Wall, 9/11, and now COVID-19 are three of the times where the world looked different before and after. These events changed the world. Life before coronavirus was getting busier and busier. We were running faster and faster between social media, Tinder hookups, traveling, international travel as though we were getting on a bus, instantaneous gratification. The world was getting faster and faster and spinning quicker and quicker. There's a Yeats poem called Things Fall Apart, and he talks about a falconer who's trying to keep an eye on his falcon as it flies and it turns round and round in the gyre. And ultimately what happens is the falcon can't communicate with the falconer, and things fall apart. It moves out of the circle, and anarchy is rained upon the world. I believe that's where we are at. On Friday morning, I spoke to a friend of mine in Venice. It was on my talk show, and I wanted to give our listeners some insight into what she's dealing with. She lives in a small apartment, as most apartments in Venice are, along with her husband and her children, and they have now been forced to put themselves, as the whole of Italy has done, into isolation or into quarantine. It's extremely, extremely difficult for them. And her advice to me is to tell our listeners here in South Africa just to take it day by day. Get through one day and then start another day. She gave us some interesting points as well. But one of the more important things that I took out of it was a phrase that she kept using: just be still. And I thought that's so interesting because it is so counter to everything that we know in 2020. The minute this broke, the story broke, and the fact, the real possibility of us going into quarantine, what did people do is they ran out to buy toilet paper, hand sanitizer. Why they didn't buy gin, I don't know, but that's a different thing. We needed to do something. And that is exactly counter to what we have to do with fighting this virus. We need to just stand still. In many ways, the world is being reset. It's like God or the universe has hit that reboot button, and we need to be patient whilst we come back online. In the meantime, travel has paused, factories have stopped, families are retreating into their own homes and their own units, and they might even have to spend time with people that they've ignored for a while. It means not going to bars and clubs and movies and restaurants and schools or any functions. It means not rushing anywhere. It means not shaking hands, but rather turning inward into ourselves and to our families. It's a matter of looking inward and not outward, towards ourselves and not to others. Remember the time where we'd want to send somebody a letter, we would sit and write it out by hand. We would put it in the envelope, seal it, put a stamp on, post it. Ultimately, it would get to the postman who would trudge from house to house and deliver that mail for somebody to open and to read. Now, I'm not saying that we need to go back to that. We certainly don't. There are many advantages in the technology that is provided for us today. But for the time being, we need to accept that we need to be still. I'm of course not talking about the incredibly brave souls, doctors, nurses, support staff, people who are preparing food, making sure that there is food available for all of us. I'm not talking about people who need to make sure that we all can manage through this period. But for the rest of us, we have to do what is asked of us, and that might mean just being still. We need to be still for long enough that we get to see the joy in the small things, maybe the greenery of the garden, the sound of the birds, the joy in our children's jokes. We need to stop and notice everything around us. The universe has slowed us down, and we need to slow down with it, because there is God in that pause. There is God in that space, and there is space for us in that too. To me, the message of the virus is fairly uncomplicated. The only way to deal with it is to retreat, isolate, and wait. There will be nothing achieved by fighting it, and the sooner we realize it, the better. We need to just be still. I'm Howard Feldman. Thanks for listening.